Hey everyone, this is Marko from Semi-Informed Football. We're going to have the second episode of our midweek fanjection. So, about a few weeks back, I had my friend Ross on the show. He was a Romanista, Jolo Rossi. He was on the show and just talking about the trials and tribulations of the Roma team, recently after a new coach hiring. So, had a lot of fun with that. We went through a lot of things on Roma, but this time, first of all, I was going to say that a lot of people reached out. They loved the episode, but they're like, oh, okay, well, where's my Milan episode? Where's my Napoli episode? Because I had a lot of friends that are big Serie A fans. So we're actually going to jump into an episode first with Juventus. And with this episode, I have my friend Luigi on. Luigi, how's it going?
Not bad. Happy to be here.
Yeah.
Looking forward to talking everything about this crazy team that I've been following for about 30 years now.
30 years now, yeah. Luigi self-professed Juventino, Bianconeri. Is that correct, Luigi?
Correct.
Yeah, 100%. So, okay, so he's a super fan, and just harking back to say the last decade where they won 9 Serie A champions in a row and had a really, really significantly strong team. We're not in that time anymore. We're in a time where they lost points to relegation a few years back. 2 years ago, they finished in 7th spot just because of the lost points. Last year, they finished in 3rd spot. This year, now they're sitting in 6th spot. It is a tight race up top. So with Napoli being first at 32 points, we got 4 teams, Atalanta, Inter, Fiorentina, and Lazio at 28 points, and Juventus in 26. So still in Europe, it is a tight spot, but is this the place where Juventus wants to be? I don't know. So
obviously not. We're not used to this as a Juve fan. The longest drought I can remember was that post Calciopoli 2006 to 2012 when Conte came in and we went undefeated. So again, this is not ground that we're used to. Obviously, it's a new team. We have Thiago Motta who just came in. We basically flipped half the squad, if not more.
Exactly.
So, I mean, what I say to a lot of friends of mine who point to who should be blamed for this at this point, you know what? You look at Klopp's first season at Liverpool and how badly they performed coming off of Brendan Rodgers, and they did the same thing. They flipped majority of their squad, and you didn't see success for 2 to 3 years. And he's a young coach, Thiago Motta. He's got ideas. You can see the ideas forming, and it's just it hasn't clicked yet. We've been very, very unlucky with injuries. But again, when you don't have your full squad and it's hard to build chemistry with an entirely new team, and then you got all these injuries happening at the same time, it's tough. So it's a work in progress, but it'll come.
Yeah. So you're saying right now is that things look good on the horizon. You're on a path to recovery with Juventus.
So I want to say after the last 3 years of Max, and my feelings on Max and ran over them, it was time for change. You can see the change forming. Like I said, we are a possession-based side now. We do dominate majority of the games from a possession standpoint. It's just that final third we can't break down, and I think there's still some personnel missing from what Motta's trying to do.
Right.
If you look at Bologna last year, where he had Xerxes, where he had this number 9 who wasn't really a number 9. He was kind of
very mobile.
Yes, he contributed a lot to the buildup. I'm not sure Dusan Vlahovic is that guy.
More of a target man.
He's a target man.
Yeah.
He's not as good in contributing to buildup. He's a great scorer in the box, and the problem is when he's having those off games, those are the ones where you need the other guys to chip in, and if the system's not working where you have that 9 to come back and build, they end up becoming very predictable. They keep going to the wings, and it becomes a crossing match, and if one hits, it hits, and if it doesn't, it doesn't.
It doesn't. So this is a quick question I have for you, just because you kind of played it up a little bit too. So Thiago Motta coming into the squad this year, taking over from Massimiliano Allegri, who's known as a sort of a defensive first coach. And I think everybody was kind of pulling their hair out last year, all the Juventino. Dybala 2 years ago out, Chiesa this year coming out. Again, a lot of players out, a lot of players in. They did spend quite a bit of money. But with that said, and I'm going to throw you on the spot for this one right now.
Mhm.
If there is one player on any other club in all of Europe that you think would slot into Juventus seamlessly, or like maybe the position, maybe the type of player, just building up everybody else, who do you think that player would be? Who would you love to see? Maybe cash wasn't an issue, right? Just say all of a sudden somebody came off of another team and just dropped right into the Juventus starting 11. Who would you like to see there?
Ooh, that's a tough question.
Right.
There's a million players I could tell you off the top of my
Yeah.
head. Let's stay in Italy to narrow it down a little bit.
Sure.
Um, there's two guys that really spring to mind. One of them is Barella. I think
Yes.
he's probably the best midfielder in Italy. He's a player that whatever you need him to do, he will do it, and he will do it at a very, very high level. He can attack, he can defend. He's a non-stop engine. He just doesn't stop. He's one. And the other one, I'd probably say, maybe it would probably be between Kvaratskhelia or Leao, because I think our left wing isn't weak. I do rate Yildiz very highly.
Mhm.
The problem with him is I think he gets a little bit too isolated on that left-hand side, and he isn't doing what he can do because he's not close enough to goal. Whereas
Right.
I've been saying multiple times this season that I think he should be tried out as a 9 in that Xerxes type role where he can come back, he can help, and he's a decent enough finisher where if he gets in that box, he can put one away. But we need someone to drop from that top spot to help
Right.
the rest of the team. That's just how Mata's system works. He likes to overcrowd you in the middle. And like I said, with Dusan, it's not working because his link up play is just not there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with that. Like, it's very interesting to see. Like, I know a lot of the teams have been, again, in the last decade or 2 decades or so, have been moving away from a two striker system, like at the same time. But I've seen opportunities where players can feed off each other. One playing a little bit deeper, one more in the build up, right? So,
Mhm.
maybe not at the same time, maybe just kind of back and forth. But again, we see injuries happen, right? Injuries happen, and sometimes they're short injuries and sometimes they're longer injuries. And you have to kind of make with what team you have in front of you. Like even now, a way of playing as the striker on the squad. So things have to happen.
Absolutely. And I think it's very understated, although it hasn't been noticed as much, maybe because we've been drawing games and we've been keeping the score relatively close. But the injury to Bremer is catastrophic. It is the one player, if you asked me at the beginning of the season, who is the one player you can't replace in the squad,
Right.
Grayson Bremer.
Right.
And I think now that he's not playing, you're seeing the impact of a player like that. And it's not just defensively. He chipped in a handful of goals last year. We are
Right.
very weak from set pieces this season. I don't remember if we've scored even a goal off of a set piece this year.
Mhm.
But it's the total package. He's a fantastic leader, and players will be more optimistic going forward if they know that they can rely on a guy like that at the back who will cut out anything if things go wrong, right? And that's not to say Kalulu has come in and done a fantastic job. Don't get me wrong. Gatti, he has his games. He's here and there, but he's done his job for the most part. But it's a different mentality. It's like when Liverpool's missing Van Dijk. You
Right.
see it immediately, right?
Your
And
captain on the back. Yeah.
exactly. And obviously in Italy, you don't get that spotlight as much as you do in the PL, but I would go toe to toe with anybody to say that Bremer is definitely within the top 3 center backs in the world right now.
Interesting. So you mentioned a word there, spotlight, and that's another thing that I was thinking about this whole thing. Now, just away from kind of the current squad of Juventus and back to Juventus as a club, do you think Juventus faces a lot of pressure because of its legacy? You
Absolutely.
know, yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, look, you can go back and forth with Milan and Inter fans all you want, but at the end of the day, I don't think it's debatable that Juve is probably the biggest club in Italy. I would go on out on a limb and say that.
sure.
And every team that happens to be the biggest in their country is going to face that scrutiny. And then with Juve, you have the past that might not be the best depending on who you ask. And
Of course.
there's a lot there. Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. But look, growing up when I was coming in, like watching in the late '90s, early 2000s,
Right.
Juventus was a squad that teams just did not want to draw in the Champions League. It was terrifying. They did not want to go to the Delle Alpi. They just didn't want to face Juve, period. And that aura is gone. I mean, can they get it back? Absolutely. It might take a while. Like I said, it's a new squad, and I'm sure the rebuild is going to take a while. But look at Inter, right?
Right.
5 years ago, they looked like a complete write-off. They were finishing 7th, 6th consistently, and they brought in Marotta, who, it came from Juve. Fantastic, probably the biggest move that they made. Players, coaches, staff, everything included. Beppe Marotta was probably the guy that had the biggest hand in turning Inter and what they are today. And I don't think you can argue that they're probably one of the best teams on the planet right now.
Oh yeah, solid. Like again, even they're standing right now instead in the table. I just feel it's we still have a lot of games to play, right? So you can never count that team out. Solid from beginning to end, and honestly, you've seen them doing well in the Champions League. You know what? Making the final 2 years ago. Like, that's all crazy. So, another thing you did mention, kind of growing up, right? And I know this is again, me growing up. So I started watching Serie A in the '90s, right?
Yeah.
And I was introduced to teams like Lazio and Inter as being minnow. Like they were always the bottom. Yeah, the ones that people beat up on, right? And to see Lazio and Inter now being, pretty significant clubs within the league, it's a big change. But like saying this, like again, we've been watching for numerous decades and everything like that. And I don't know. One thing I want to throw out there: what would you say your favorite moment as a Juventus fan was? Was it a specific game? Was it watching a player? Was it a specific trophy? Was it the Champions League? What was your favorite moment as a Juventus fan?
So obviously we haven't won a Champions League in it's going to be 30 years in a couple of years. So obviously the obvious answer would be the last time we won. I was just old enough to have witnessed that, so I do feel a little lucky for that.
Yeah.
But again, like I was a little young. The one game, if anyone were to ever ask me, what's the one game that comes to mind that you will never leave your mind as a Juventus fan, and it's always the first thing. It is the 3-1 home leg against Real Madrid in 2003, where we were coming off a 2-1 loss at the Bernabeu, and that was the game where and this narrative, this back and forth between Juventus and Arsenal fans have been going on for about 2 decades, because they will tell you that 2003 Thierry Henry should have won the Ballon d'Or and assists and goals and this and that.
Yeah.
But if you go back and watch that Champions League campaign in 2003 and you watch Pavel Nedved and how much of an impact he had, and in that game, he was just unplayable. He was fantastic. And the minute he got that second yellow that ruled him out of the final, dropped to his knees in tears. And I saw that and I knew the final was already going to be just a bad game.
Yeah, no. Well, we've had some great players like coming through Juventus, like not even the Del Piero, Zidane, Nedved, like you mentioned, like just a lot of the top talent. Like again, it seems like even players that are already playing in Serie A, they just get attracted to Juventus, right? So that's a huge thing. So aside from players, now this is another one I want to. Maybe this is drawing a line in the stand. What is your most hated rivalry of Juventus?
Oh, it
like Inter. Okay.
Yeah, it's not even a question.
Yeah.
So it dates back to the whole Calciopoli thing, and
Yeah.
From the outside looking in, 99% of fans will you get the label of cheats and match fixing and this and that, and if you dive deep enough into that whole thing, there's a lot of stories here and there that just don't match up. And Obviously, you're going to hear it as you're the Juve fan and you're making excuses and this and that. But
Right.
all I know is from that day onward, it's been Inter, and I don't think it's ever going to change since then.
Yeah. For sure. I guess for me, it would have been Milan. Just that again, starting to watch the league when I did watch it, it's like those were the ones that were just kind of trading blows all the time, right? And both having significant success early on, right? So, but again, you know what? There are a lot of teams too.
I think there's more of it's more of a gentleman's rivalry between
Yeah.
us
Okay.
and Milan in terms of we're both very successful teams. We're the most successful in Italy. They've obviously been the most successful in Europe. But when you watch the Juve and Milan matches, you don't get those like fa- fans are fighting, players are fighting, coaches. Every time we play Inter, there's just animosity there. You see it, you feel it, and it's there. It's not going away anytime soon.
Yeah, but it makes it fun. It makes it a night of fun rivalry. Something to go down to the stadium for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, what about like again? You see, Juve is signing a lot of players. Spending a lot of money. What about their youth development? Like what have you seen come through like their youth ranks rather than them just kind of buying from different clubs? Like, do you think that's something that they should be they're struggling with, or they should be building from, or
So, those really successful years that you were alluding to before, which was well, I guess the entire 2010 decade,
yeah,
but even before that, Juve was not a club known for developmental, like bringing players from the youth system. I mean, if you actually go back and look between Marquisio, who I believe debuted in 2007 or 8 with us, between him and the next youth graduate who became a senior player, it was like a decade. Like it was a very, very
right,
long stretch. And about 3 or 4 years ago, Juve created the Juve Next Gen, which is now our youth system that plays in Serie C.
yeah,
And it's done like wonders for the squad. Yildiz came from the Next Gen.
right,
You had Illing Jr., who eventually was sold off. You had Dean Huyson, who was eventually sold off. So I mean, from a development standpoint, you got Mbangula also, who's been playing for us this year and who's done quite well. Savona has been playing for us this year and has done excellent from a player who nobody even heard of six
right.
months ago, right? So obviously, youth in this day and age is huge, but especially for Italian teams who can't punch on the level of the Madrids and the Barças and the PL teams, youth is huge, and this next gen has completely turned us around. Even if it's just for players to sell off for funds to buy maybe more marquee or more quality players, but it's something to build off of, right? And then the ones who we feel are quality enough to stay around, they stay around. And like I said, Yield is getting his flowers now for being one of the best young players in Europe, right? So
Dynamic. I mean,
it's clearly working. And so they definitely have to keep going with it, but we'll see where that goes. But it is good to have a development system that's finally developing.
right. And it's so Serie A of us football is changing a lot. Like I've heard even management at Milan saying, we're not going to be one of those clubs that spends all that money buying players, right? Like that's not how we're going to be a little bit more, I guess, responsible with our cash payments and everything
Mhm.
with the way we were managing the team. And I feel like, um, you know, it's tough. It's tough to compete with, say, a Real Madrid or any one of the top six EPL teams, right? Like it's really really tough to compete with them. But that's where I feel Juventus is doing that. And they're trying to adapt to more modern football, modern European football, and say, you know what, in a combination of, you know, signing talent that like a Yildiz or like a Kvaratskhelia in Napoli, getting them out on the cheap, but really developing them into something that these teams like Real Madrid or Manchester United are chasing, right? So just being able to hold on to that. Now, with that said, like where do you see how things are changing and everything like that? Where do you see Juve in the next, say, 5 years? Are they a top four club on the regular? Like, what do you think?
I think we at the end of this season, I would be really shocked if we didn't finish top four. Um, as I said, we flipped half the squad, but we did bring in a lot of quality. The one that sticks out the most so far is probably Conceição.
Yeah, great.
And I think for 30 million, I think that's an absolute steal.
Right.
Considering what he does as a winger, how tricky he can be, how shifty he is, and just he's a major headache for any left back that has to go up against them.
Of course.
Kefren Turam was another one under 20 million. Great buy. And it is strange to see that the players that Juntoli decided to go for who are on the cheaper side, Turam, Conceição, maybe not the cheapest, but Kalulu, another one. Those are the ones that are really, really hitting it out of the park right now. And then you have, let's say, a Douglas Luiz, who was a $50 million purchase, and he just can't pan out for whatever it may be. He's only really started 2 games.
Right.
I think judging him at this point is maybe a little harsh, but from what we've seen, we haven't seen a $50 million player. I love the idea of Coop Miners coming in. He has not shown to be a $60 million player as of yet.
Right.
So it does seem like Juntoli is almost a manager that has become more able to find those cheap gems and turn them into like diamonds than buy that, because he didn't really have that money at Napoli to go and spend 70 million on a player. So when he has that money now, who knows if he's the only one he really did was Osimhen, and that did pay off handsomely. They won their Scudetto, and he was a great player for them. But when you don't have that kind of money regularly, I guess you're not really ready to spend that type of money, or do you know what to spend that type of money on, right? So I think it's a learning curve for Juntoli. It's a learning curve for Motta. It's a new team. Give it a few years, but I do think they're definitely in the right direction right now.
Perfect. So with that said, you're saying that's a little bit more longer term. How about shorter term? Where do they finish in the league this season?
It's a tough question. I mean, like I said, the hit to Bremer was a real knock, and I think just from that alone, they'll find it really hard to win a title this year. And then like Inter is firing at all cylinders right now. Napoli, you have that Conte factor. You have the fact that they're only playing 1 game a week, so it's already beneficial to them. So from here to the end of the season, it looks like those will be the top 2. Of course, anything can happen. But I think after that, 3rd and 4th, somewhere in that area should be where we're finishing, probably alongside Milan. And then you can't rule out Atalanta. I think they're just... Gasperini, I think, is just a wizard. He's probably the best Italian coach there is right now, if you, I guess, minus Ancelotti from that criteria. But what he's been able to do with a squad with minimal funds, who sell their best 2 to 3 players almost every year, and they keep getting better. And it took him a Europa League win to get his credit, but I do like that people are finally starting to notice how good he is. And he's definitely had a system that's not common in Italy, but it's working very well for him.
Yeah, no, and honestly, I think the Azzurri finally found their striker, their number 9 in Matteo Retegui on the team. Honestly, I guess what Gasperini's doing is getting the most out of the players that he has. Again, you mentioned earlier in the podcast about Joshua Zirkzee, right? Zirkzee, I remember him at Bayern. It came in highly touted. I'm like, yeah, you know what, this could be, our, I guess, like a backup to Lewandowski, or like an heir apparent to the Lewandowski, but it just didn't work, right? But just kind of floating around after that, and had a great year last year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's amazing. Oh, you know what? Honestly,
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say there's certain coaches who can just bring the best out of players, and I don't know that there's a coach in the world right now who's a better manager at doing that than Gasperini. You look at Duvan Zapata, a player that people would say he can't even hit double digits, and he was winning or in the race all the time for top scorer when he was at Atalanta. Lucas Muriel was an overweight, he couldn't play, absolute monster at Atalanta. Papu Gomez came from Catania. He was a nobody. Wins Serie A MVP. Ademola Lookman was at Leicester, not even getting minutes. And he's scoring hat tricks in the Europa League final.
Yeah. Putting away the perfect Bayer Leverkusen season.
Yeah. And it's not only what they do when they're under Gasperini, it's when they leave and they can't replicate it. And then you sit back and you wonder, what does this guy do to make these players do what they're doing? And he's just, I don't think there's a coach out there better at identifying a player's strengths and turning it. Even De Ketelaere could not score a goal at Milan. Look at him now.
Yeah, no, but and I think that's what it is. I think it's a mutual respect too, right? Because if you know that you're gonna pull a little bit harder because you know that he will aim to get the best out of you, right? So it's just a buy into the system. Okay, you know what? Just before we kind of finish up, I have a rapid fire segment where I'm just gonna kind of throw out a few things and let's see if you can kind of just. You don't even have to come up with a reasoning why. If you do, it's 100% up to you. But I just have a few questions right here. First of all, I guess this is an easy one too. Well, not for me. I'm just saying this is an easy one to probably expect. Is that your favorite Juventus player of all time?
Yeah, I'm sure you can probably guess. It's the reason why I started following them. Obviously, Del Piero coming in in the mid '90s. Funny story about that. A lot of people don't know this, but coming off of the '94 World Cup, where Italy went to the final, there was a lot of hype around Dino Baggio. Roberto Baggio, obviously, but Dino Baggio was the other Baggio. That's what he was known as.
You weren't related, by the way, right?
Correct. And he had such a fantastic '94 World Cup, and he was playing at Juventus at the time. And Parma came in with a big offer for Dino Baggio, and he rejected it. And in his place, Juve actually had offered them Alessandro Del Piero, and they had accepted. And the day before the move was set to happen, Dino Baggio had a change of heart and decided he would accept the move. And it kept Del Piero at Juventus, and he ended up becoming the symbol of the biggest club in Italy. So and this is, you can look it up. This is a true story. They've talked about it many times. Lippi has talked about it ad nauseum. But just crazy how things like that happen. A 24-hour span brings you from Parma to the biggest player in the biggest club of the whole country, which is that's crazy to think.
That's a Netflix doc. If I ever heard. Next question. This one may be a little bit tricky, but the most underrated player on the squad currently.
Oof. You know what? There's a lot of guys you can say. I think Cambiaso has become a player who's become one of the better players in his position, and the wing back position or the full back position for quite a while now has been very scarce, both the left and the right. So he's one of the guys
all over Europe, though.
All over Europe, yeah. And he would be one that came to mind. But you know what? Just after the year that he had last year, getting left out of the Italy squad, and I think Locatelli under Allegri just had such a bad rap last year and just such a sour taste. And since Motta has come in, he's been exceptional. He's been one of our best players. He's been captain for a lot of this season, and he's been he showed great leadership qualities. I think he's definitely turned it around, and I think he deserves a little shout out this season. I think he's really turned it around. I think that snub from the Italy squad in the summer really got to him, and it's good to see that he's turned it around.
Definitely. Okay, this one, the biggest heartbreak as a fan. Oof.
You're talking to a guy who's team.
Yeah, I know.
7 Champions League finals. I've witnessed 5 of them myself. So I would say the Milan one in 2003 hurt a lot. Just because going out on penalties and just the run that we had to that final, beating Barcelona, beating Madrid, like they were really up against it for a lot of that tournament. Just to lose Nedved for the final after he had his Ballon d'Or, that's probably the one that hurts the most. And the Barcelona one in 2015 was very
that comeback.
Yeah, but just because I went into that game thinking that we didn't have much of a chance, and then when we equalized and we took control for a good 15-20 minutes there, and we really had hope that something was going to happen, and then there was just a big Pogba getting fouled in the box and no call, and Barcelona going the other way on the counter and scoring. It was just such a Juventus thing to happen in a Champions League final. But yeah, those are probably the two that stick out the most, I'd say.
Dangle it out there and then just take it away.
Yeah.
How about that Ronaldo bicycle kick? Were you in awe just like Buffon?
Oh, man, you know what? It's bittersweet to see that it happens against your team. Obviously, not the greatest feeling, but just to know that you witnessed just such quality. Like that is not easy to do what he did, and to have him on the team just a few short months later is awesome as well. He had a few good years here. You know what? You'll get some people saying they hated it. You'll get some people saying they loved it. I personally really enjoyed watching him at Juventus. Obviously, we didn't achieve what we wanted to achieve with him. A lot of that came down to bad management and stuff like that, and you can't fully put it on his shoulders, but I did enjoy his tenure at Juve. It was quite fun to watch such a player with such high quality.
Definitely. Okay, so this is it. Parting thoughts. What's a message that you want to give to fellow Juventus fans out there? What's one thing that you'd want to say to them?
Hang in there.
Yeah, hang in.
It'll turn around. I've like I said, I've been watching this team for 30 years. When I first started watching them, they were coming off a trophyless drought for quite a couple of years, and the cycle comes back around and they'll dominate for a while, and then they'll hit their drought. So we had 9 years in a row. We spoke about it earlier. 9 years in a row of titles, and it's really hard to expect that team's just going to keep steamrolling like that. And they've hit a bit of a brick wall, but like I said, hang in there. It'll come back around. Juventus is Juventus, so we'll be back on top soon enough.
All right, Luigi, thank you so much for joining. You know what? I guess maybe we'll check in and at the end of the season.
Please
as well.
I would love to do this again.
Awesome. Everybody, thank you so much for listening to the podcast today. We'll talk to you soon.